I think mentoring is about walking together to gain this experience. So both experiences. So excellent, because sometimes in the coach, we use the experience from the coach, not the coachee. But in mentor, you use the experience from mentor and mentee, as you say, 1 + 1, 3. So I like this.
You know, if you are approaching things with a mentoring mindset, with the idea of being a learner and a giver of knowledge, it actually happens simultaneously with the stuff that you're already doing. So I would say there's really 3 mindsets. There's the mentoring mindset of being a learner and a giver, and having this idea of your relationships being developmental relationships.
So actually, one of the things that went across my mind when you started talking about this was, gosh, this would be really hard if you're a mentor in that situation. Like, it probably feels great being a mentor when you feel like you can help someone and, you know, contribute to their ongoing success and future. Welcome back to Headline, the podcast where we dig into what leadership, culture, and connection really looks like in the day-to-day moments that matter. This is where we explore the human side of influence, those tough calls, the quiet pivots, and the conversations that shape how we show up. Today's guest is someone who shaped how I think about leadership and mentoring. Lisa Fain is the CEO of the Centre for Mentoring Excellence and the president of the International Mentoring Association. She started her career as an employment attorney, spending years leading diversity and inclusion strategies, and now works with leaders around the world to build mentoring cultures that actually work. You know, the kind that drives growth, belonging, and real change. She's also the co-author of 2 books, and last month she gave the most wonderful TEDx talk, which was called How Intentional Connections Can Boost Your Career. And we'll drop the link in the show notes, and it's really a great watch. So we're thrilled to have Lisa with us here, right here in Seattle, which is, as you know, where I'm based. And of course, I'm joined with my brilliant co-host, leadership powerhouse and global EHS strategist, Andreza Arahu. Hey, Andreza.
Hey, Megan, how are you? What's new in Seattle today?
What's new in Seattle? We seem to ask this all the time, don't we? Lovely, actually, and I'm going on a boat this afternoon, so I don't know if our viewers want to hear that, but it's a lovely summer afternoon here.
Excellent. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Lisa, so I think it will be a good moment to go deep and understand more about mentoring and leadership. So, wow. Thank you, Lisa, for accepting our invitation. So, please welcome to Headline.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with both of you today.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So I would like to start with first question, okay? So, as Megan commented in your introduction, you start your career as an employment attorney. What drew you into that world, and what did those early years teach you about leadership, power, and people?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, my initial entry into the legal world was after I had worked in Washington, D.C. before I became a lawyer. And my initial intention in going to law school was to be able to write legislation and go back to Washington, D.C. and change the world by doing public interest work. And in my own naivete, I didn't realize I was going to graduate law school uh, in significant amount of debt, and that my interest in working in the public interest was going to have to be put on hold. But I've always had a heart for prevention, and also into making workplaces just work better. And I found employment law had that great balance of creating, there was the reactive part about litigation for sure, but there was also the counseling aspect where I could really counsel employers on how to create better workplaces through better communication. And my heart really lit up when people would call me and say, "Hey, I know I found myself in this situation. How do I avoid it in the future?" And while I was giving legal advice, really it was rooted in that better communication and more intentional connection from the get go was going to create a safer workspace. It was going to prevent a lot of the conflict that ended up in the litigation on the back end. So it was that part of the practice of law that I found really, really fulfilling. The ability to make a more proactive difference in the workplace. And it taught me a lot about power, honestly, because I realized that when employers tamp down the ability of people to communicate authentically, when they discourage uncomfortable conversations, conflict is going to bubble up and problems are going to arise because people don't feel safe to address difficult things head on. And then they fester and it becomes litigious, it becomes difficult. There becomes an assumption that people are approaching things from some way that is nefarious or ill-intended or discriminatory, as opposed to really building that safety and trust from the beginning. And so it taught me a lot about the importance of intentionally balancing power differentials in the workplace.
And now, Lisa, you've moved over into mentoring and coaching. Is there some thread, do you think, that connects that original start that you had into what must be an amazing career now by supporting people with mentoring and coaching?
The thread that connects it is the thread of inclusion in the workplace. So, in between that practice of law and what I'm doing now, I really came to believe that it was through workplace relationships where people needed to connect with people who were different from them in some substantial way that you really started to see these workplaces that were transformative from a belonging standpoint, right? And so it was through this lens of DEI that I realized that creating structure for workplace relationships, which is really what mentoring does, allows people to develop better leadership skills, to create better workplaces, and then to advance their own careers in a way that's much more holistic. And so, though I don't know that I could have pointed to where I am now when I was practicing law, I think that station in between is what links the two.
I think you can explore this point. What is the main difference between coaching and mentoring?
hmm Yeah, it's a great question, Andresa, and one that I get a lot. So they are related. They are definitely uh, kind of sisters, if you will, and there's a lot of overlap. I like to say that all great mentors are coaches, but not all great coaches are mentors. So here's what I mean by that. Um, Coaching is a skill that is something that is much more performance based. It is short term. It is driven by the tools that the coach brings to the relationship. Mentoring, on the other hand, is long term. It's developmental. The mentee drives the learning. And in fact, I think the easiest way to differentiate the two is to think about the fact that mentoring has three characteristics. It's a learning relationship. Learning, I say often, very often, is the purpose, the process, and the product of mentoring, right? Without learning, it's not a mentoring relationship. There is reciprocity. We know that mentors give and mentees get, mentees give and mentees get. And so there's this mutuality that is not present in a coaching relationship. And then there's this idea of co-creation. I call it the funny math of mentoring, that 1 + 1 = 3. Right. So you have the mentor, you have the mentee, and then you have the mentoring relationship that the mentor and the mentee co-create together. And that's really what distinguishes it from coaching. The coaching relationship is not co-created in that sense of mutuality that the mentoring relationship is created in.
I think mentoring is about walking together to glean this experience. So both
Yes,
experiences. So excellent. Because
Lisa.
sometimes in the coach, we use the experience from the coach, not the coachee. But in mentor, you use the experience from mentor and mentee, as you say, 1 + 1 = 3. So I like this. So thank you. Wow, good.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good point, Andresa. It's not about the transfer of knowledge, as some might think. When we think about mentors, that we think about Yoda, this idea of like that this one person exists who has the wisdom of all the stages and all the ages just to transfer onto somebody. But really, the beauty of mentoring is it's about more than just sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. It is about learning together and co-creating that relationship. And the data really supports it. It's so exciting to see data continue to come out to show that mentoring improves career satisfaction for mentors, leadership skills for mentors, cultural competency for mentors. And it's not just the satisfaction of giving back. There really are tangible benefits that a mentor gets as well.
Lisa, you just gave me an aha moment. I remember at one company I worked for, and they did this thing, they called it reverse mentoring. And maybe you teach that or promote that as well, I'm not sure. But my experience with it was that they set up these mentoring relationships where it was actually a more junior person in terms of, typical corporate hierarchy, who was then mentoring the more senior person. And as the more senior person, I've got to say, it felt strange. But actually, to your point, I got so much out of it. Do you see many places, many companies doing this type of reverse mentoring?
Yes, it's actually very much on the rise, and it can be really, really constructive. I don't like to call it reverse mentoring because to me, the term reverse mentoring has an implication that the more junior person has less to offer, right? We actually call it complementary mentoring, but it's the same idea. And in order for it really to be successful, there has to be this competency of creating psychological safety in the relationship. It can be so terrific because it provides exposure to the more junior person who's serving as the mentor. It provides a sense of awareness and exposure to kind of intergenerational, interlevel um, uh, ideologies, workings, perceptions for the more senior person. And it's a great mutual learning thing. It's so one of the things that I love about that modality of complementary mentoring is something that I talk about a lot, which is there are three elements of career success: performance, image, and exposure. Okay, so performance is how well you do the job. Image is how you're viewed in your industry or your organization. And exposure is exposure to people, resources, and opportunities, right? So if we call it the pie model, it's actually not my model. It comes from a guy named Harvey Coleman. But he calls it the pie model of career success. Performance plus image and exposure equal 100%, right? So I often ask groups, like, if I were to ask you to give me a percentage of career success that you think performance accounts for, what would it be? So I'll ask the two of you, like, knowing that P plus I plus E equals 100%, how much do you think performance matters?
Oh, I'm going to say 50%.
What do you think, Andresa?
No, 6% more. I think more performance.
Okay, so it interestingly, what Coleman found is that performance only accounts for 10% of career success. It's table
What?
stakes, meaning,
Oh my God.
yes, I know, hold on to one of ours,
Oh
right?
my God.
You don't get the other 90% unless you do a good job. But I could do a lot. I can be adequate at my job, and I can have less exposure to people, resources, and opportunities, and be less well regarded. And you'll do much better than I'll do. Um, Even though, excuse me, I'll do much better than you do if I have that image and exposure, because I know where to go to get the knowledge. I have the connections and the resources. And one of the things that's beautiful about complementary mentoring is that it gives the younger person, the more junior person, exposure, right? And allows them to really see what possibility is, understand how things are done, and have access in a way that they might not otherwise have had. So, the reaction, I love your reaction, Megan, because that's the reaction I get all the time is like, are you kidding me? I've been working so hard, right? And like I was told, I don't know if you were told this, but one of the things I can remember my parents telling me when I was young and really ambitious was just do so good a job that people can't ignore you, right? Just be really, really great at what it is you do. And yes, it's important to be really, really great, but it's not sufficient. You have to also have that exposure, and you also have to understand how you show up and be well enough regarded in your industry to have full benefit of that success.
I think sometimes we grow with limiting beliefs, as you comment. So please leave your work show you. Leave your work. Your work will show about you, but not is true.
Yes.
I think so. Wow,
No.
excellent point.
Yeah.
Breakthrough.
Ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I know, I'm just absolutely amazed, and especially some of those stats that you were dropping as well, Lisa. Absolutely amazed. So then tell me, and I know that you work on mentoring all the time, but some people think that it's, I don't know the word for it, like that it's softer or that it's
Mm.
like not a real type of, leadership thing to do. With those numbers, though, it sounds like it's an absolute necessity for workplaces and for people to really succeed.
Yes. And it has to also be um, leveraged correctly, meaning mentoring as mentee is driven based on a mentee's needs, right? So the mentee has to do the sufficient self-reflection in order to be able to show up in the relationship. And the mentor has to set the tone so that there is authentic sharing as well, right? So the reason that a lot of people think that it's fluffy or soft or unnecessary is because they're used to what I call pair and pray, meaning let's just pair people and pray that it succeeds with no support, no ongoing communication, no expectation setting or knowledge of what makes for an effective mentoring relationship. And that knowledge is useful not just in formal mentoring relationships, but it's also really useful for informal and organic mentoring relationships to understand what does it mean as a learner to be able to take charge of your own learning journey and ask for from your mentor what you need.
In
Sharing
your 10x,
feedback.
sorry,
Hmm.
keep going.
No, I was just saying, asking for, creating the expectation in your mentoring relationship that you are going to have to give and receive feedback to your mentor about, hey, this is working great for me. I need more of this from you. Hey, can we tweak the way we're interacting? Because I would love it if you just, held back, asked a bunch more questions to get me thinking, and then offered solutions. If you have that dialogue and that expectation that you are going to negotiate the way that you interact, then it's just astronomical, the results that you can see from this kind of relationship.
And is this what you meant in your TEDx talk that you talked about intentional mentoring?
hmm Yeah, it is. It is. I meant both the intention within the mentoring relationship and the intention in seeking mentors, right? Who do I want to be learning from? Are there peers that I want to be connecting with? Is there somebody more junior, to your point, who I can be learning from and with together? So it's intentionality in who I'm connecting with and what form and how I'm connecting with them. How am I setting up those relationships?
So thinking about the mentoring program is part of the design of HR, but in the work daily basics, I think is each area need to design this and use this to improve your results. I see the real connection with mentoring and productivity. Can you share something about this?
Yeah, I think it's critical to have um, mentoring moments, mentoring conversations, mentoring relationships, mentoring spaces, right? And so all of that will help fuel productivity. If you are only relying on one relationships that require an hour every other week or an hour once a month or half a day every quarter, you're going to get results, but you're not going to get the same kind of results as you will if you infuse mentoring in the culture in various ways. And I think what you see is higher engagement, you see more innovation, you see a better ability to connect the dots between disparate functions and disparate ideas if you create a mentoring culture that's really encouraging learning at all levels every day across different parts of the organization, right? As opposed to let me just learn from you in my one silo, vertically. There's so much to be learned horizontally and across those different divisions within organizations.
Lisa, I feel like I owe an apology to every person I've ever mentored. And anyone who's listening knows who they are. Um, this is really different to what I thought mentoring was. And it sounds like as well when you're talking about mentoring culture, it's something that is can become ingrained in an organization, sort of like a day-to-day way of interacting with people and thinking about those learning relationships.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, a lot of leaders um, who, particularly senior leaders like yourself, who are well respected, and women in organizations that are typically and fields that are typically male dominated fields, when you are asked to be mentored, there's an expectation that you have, and maybe even an expectation that your mentee has, that this conversation is going to be one where you shape the path for your mentee, right? And it's not. It is the case that the path will be shaped through your conversation, but it is not the case that it's your job as the mentor to shape the path. Your job is to ask the questions, that will help the mentee determine their own path. So you share your own experience. I like to tell mentors that the best thing you can do is to stop talking at a question mark and not at a period. Right? So you can certainly share that in my journey, I did this, this, and this, and here's what worked for me. And here are some of the challenges that I faced. And then instead of saying, okay, do it that way, what comes next is how might that work for you? How does that land for you? What are the obstacles to you proceeding in that way? What do I need to understand about your situation to understand if that's going to work well for you? Right? You see the difference? It's a tweak. but it's a really important tweak.
But thinking about the culture of mentoring, okay, talking about
Mm.
companies that have the culture, the mentoring culture, so put this like a learning journey. I love this. But if you are in a company that don't have this vision, so
Mhm.
how you can decide to go in a mentoring program, so and understand all the values that we are sharing here today, so wow, you can grow a lot. But we know the realities from different companies. So some companies had this, the mentoring program inside the culture, but others no. So what you recommend?
Yeah, it's such a great question because and this is really what drove my TEDx talk and my thought about developing a TEDx talk around a developmental network. There are two pieces. There's the organizational piece, and there's the individual agency and action piece. And in an ideal world, you have an organization that values it, that creates some formal structure and some competency building around a mentoring program. And you have an individual who takes agency and accountability for creating um, these developmental relationships, mentoring, peer mentoring, reverse mentoring, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't, to your point, always happen. Sometimes you're missing one of those elements, which is the organizational structure, but you still have the individual action and accountability. And so what I say to people is, how are you going to create your own developmental network? You can seek mentors in your organization. You can seek mentors externally. If you are in an industry and you have an association, a lot of times there's formal mentoring programs there, but you don't have to wait for formal mentoring programs. You still can create the structure in or more organic mentoring relationships. I might find that I want to learn, uh, you know, let's talk about how to influence within the organization. And I might see you, Andresa, as a leader who really knows how to do that. And so I might say to you, I'm really looking to learn about that, more how to navigate organizational structure. I know it's something that you're really good at. Could we have a conversation where I find out, where I learn more about what's worked for you in that, and ask you some questions? I can see if we. I'm not asking you to be my mentor, because you might run. That's a big ask. That's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
asking somebody to marry you on the first date,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Instead, I'm asking you to have a conversation about something that I know you know more about. And I can determine in that conversation whether you have the interest, whether that we have the chemistry, whether you have the capability to have a developmental conversation that's ongoing. And maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is nope, but I'm learning a lot from you, and I can add you as part of my network and my resources. And maybe later it'll develop into a mentoring conversation. But all of that is about me as a learner taking responsibility for what it is I want to learn, and putting out feelers as to who might be able to teach that to me, and asking for the learning that I need from the people who I think might be able to give it to me.
And I recognize, our vulnerabilities. I think, to decide to create this network, to talk with people and see people that is in a different level, and we can share this. So I like this idea. So
Yeah. I think the key to having that work is for everybody to recognize that it is a reciprocal relationship. And if I was approaching that conversation as somebody who was a taker from you, I would approach it with a lot less confidence, with the wrong kind of humility, right? Where maybe even shyness, maybe even just being a receptor as opposed to a giver. But when I can think about it as, even as much as saying, here's what I've learned from you, here's what I've gone to implement. How rewarding is that as somebody who's shared their knowledge and giving back? And instead of saying, okay, I'm going to take from you this knowledge of you as my mentor, instead I say, you know what, I'm adding to my network here. Later on, I might come across an article related to something that you taught me in that conversation and send it to you, and there's value there. And then all of a sudden, here comes that element of reciprocity. So, not being so tied to the idea that it's a formal mentoring relationship where I
mhm.
sit at your feet and just kind of swallow the knowledge that you give to me, but instead it's this reciprocal interchange. It's much more empowering. and also much more nurturing.
Yes, and we win, I think, for both. Win-win.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Triple win, right? A win for you, a win for me, and a win for the context in which we're operating. Because
Yes.
the more you have this connectivity in any working environment, the healthier and the more nurturing and the more innovative that environment's going to be.
Because, Lisa, in workplaces where they're really busy, and some people might say, I don't have time for this. I either don't have time to be a mentor, I'm already doing my job and X, Y, and Z extra, or someone who maybe thinks, oh, gee, I really could do with having a mentor, but perhaps, as you said, they're too shy. What's a mind shift that you can make to actually realize that there is so much value in doing this and perhaps overcoming some of those obstacles that you might perceive are there?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So the first is that it doesn't always require additional time. If you are approaching things with a mentoring mindset, with the idea of being a learner and a giver of knowledge, it actually happens simultaneously with the stuff that you're already doing. So I would say there's really three mindsets. There's the mentoring mindset of being a learner and a giver, and having this idea of your relationships being developmental relationships. There's a growth mindset, which is spoken about a lot based on the work of Carol Dweck, which I'm sure both of you have heard of, which is the idea rather than having a fixed mindset of I am the way I am, I'm good at what I'm good at, I'm bad at what I'm bad at, and that's just the way it is, it's the way it's going to have to be. This idea of having a growth mindset that we can always be learning and improving and shifting and developing. And then there's what's called a beginner's mindset, which is to not be afraid to really stink at something. This idea that we have to really be good at everything that we do in the workplace, particularly as we rise in an organization. The beauty of a mentoring relationship is that it's a place where you can be a beginner. In healthy mentoring relationship, I could say to my mentor, you know what? I want to start doing this. And I want to have a really difficult conversation with my boss. I'm really nervous for it and I'm not particularly good at it. Can we practice? Can I rehearse this in our mentoring conversation and you make it hard for me? Like push back and make it really difficult for me in this practice so that when I do it, I'm more confident. If you create this laboratory within the context of mentoring, it um it is a mindset shift, right? I can show up and I can be really terrible at this thing and we can work on growing it together so that when I go out into the real world and I do the thing, I'm way better at it. And I think that beginner's mindset is really, really critical to success, both in mentoring and in your career.
Hello, everyone. If you are studying about safety culture, leadership, risk perception, I would like to recommend my books. They are available in Amazon.com, and each book is an experience to go deep diving in safety culture, and I think will add value in your journey. Returning to the busy company, and I understand that when you connect people, we can provide psychological safety. Do you agree that when I promote this, it's possible to see data from improve mental health in the workplace?
Yeah, there's all sorts of really exciting research coming out on the effect of well-being, effective mentoring on well-being. And we actually know, I mean, you may have even seen a couple years ago, I think actually maybe it was 2022, and it's 2025 as we record this. So 3 years ago, the US Surgeon General came out with a report that there's an epidemic of loneliness. Of course, it was related to the US, but I think that this is true globally too. In this era of being virtually connected, we're also much more disconnected. And what the research continually shows is that the more connected we feel in the workplace, the better our mental health, the better our sense of well-being is, and obviously the better results that is from a productivity and a business standpoint too. But I think it's well-being from a lot of different perspectives. It's well-being in terms of feeling connected. It's well-being in terms of the self-concept of being able to show up as the best person that I want to be, having a place to get honest feedback is so important, right? For your own self concept, which is really important from a sense of well being, and also knowing that somebody's got your back, right? There's all sorts of studies on engagement that show that having a friend at work it contributes enormously to your sense of engagement. And I think that that's particularly true in the mentoring context, though it's not a friendship per se. It's somebody who is looking out for you, who cares whether you show up, who cares if you succeed, right? Who cares how you do and how you are improving and learning. It's so important in terms of well-being. And I think it transcends even just that particular organization, right? It affects your sense of well-being in all aspects of your life and not just your career when you have these kind of mentoring learning relationships.
Do you think that you should only have one mentor at a time? Like, I often think back to when I was a mentor and also was a mentee, and I feel like I only had one at a time. But what's the way of thinking these days about how you should think about those relationships?
Yeah, I love that question too, because I do think about it in terms of the developmental network. I mean, it's sort of the question like, is it better to have one best friend or to have, 12 acquaintances? I don't know that that's the apt analogy, but I do think that there's this idea of a one mentor myth, right? That I need to have one person who is my guru, right? Who I can turn to. Yeah, it's better to have one than to have none. But I think if we're only thinking about it in terms of traditional one-on-one mentoring relationships, that is a natural outgrowth of that framework. Instead, if you're thinking about it in terms of mentoring conversations and learning relationships, it's really helpful to have multiple mentors. And actually, this is why the self-reflection and the intentionality is so important. I don't know one person in my life who can help me in all of the ways that I want to grow. I'm a parent, I'm a wife, I'm a female entrepreneur, I'm a professional, I'm an attorney, I'm a writer, I'm a member of my community, and all of us have these different identities. And there isn't one person who can help me think about all of those things. And so I think and even in my professional life, there are different skills and different people who can help with. So seeking out learning for different areas from different people can be really, really helpful. And I actually encourage people to find diversity amongst their mentors. It's really helpful as a woman in corporate to to have a woman in corporate who I can look up to, who I can learn from, who can help me think through how to be a successful woman in corporate. But it's also really helpful to have a male mentor who can help me see things that a woman might not be able to help me see as well, and to get those diverse perspectives. So I think having multiple mentors for multiple purposes and knowing that it is not your responsibility as a mentee to follow what a mentor says. It's not a recipe for prescription. It's about development and getting different perspectives, and you are in charge of your learning. So it's not about pitting one mentor against another. It's about getting different perspectives and then interpreting how that helps you grow as a whole individual.
Lisa, I'm curious about, is possible to measure the success of mentoring program or mentoring process, and how to?
Yeah. I love I wish there was an easy answer and you could say, A, B, or C variable, Andresa, but the truth is there's lots of different levels. And the first thing I ask an organization who asks me, how do you measure the success of the mentoring program? My first response is, what's the purpose that you are engaging in mentoring for, right? So some organizations will embark on programs for engagement, some for recruitment, some for promotion, retention, diversity, succession planning. There's lots of different ways. So first you want to think about what is the ultimate outcome from an organizational standpoint. But there's actually kind of a pyramid of measurement. You want to be measuring success at the individual level, right? What is success for a mentee? What is success for a mentor at the level of the pair? So all mentoring relationships should have goals. Are they achieving their goals? Then at the programmatic level, right? What is the satisfaction with the mentoring program, the belief that they are getting the support that they need, their responsiveness? What are some of the outcomes that are happening? There's lots of different ways to do that. And then at the organizational level, and there are what I call leading and lagging indicators at the organizational level, right? It may be things initially like participation, level of satisfaction, but long term, you want to be looking at what are the priorities and what was the reason for instituting the mentoring initiative in the first place, right? How is it affecting your retention? How is it affecting your recruitment, your succession planning, your diversity metrics, whatever it might be? So there's lots of different ways to measure that. And the short answer to that question is it really depends on what the outcomes you're looking to achieve are, as long as you're looking at it at those different variables.
Yes. Be clear with the purpose and set
100%,
the goals.
always.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, no organization is going to embark on mentoring for mentoring's sake. I don't know any organization other than my own, which exists for the purpose of mentoring, that's going to say, I'm going to make an investment in mentoring because I want to see more mentoring in the organization. They make an investment in mentoring because they want to see it achieve something else. And so let's know what that something else is, or else the mentoring program just becomes a check the box.
Maybe building on that, do you ever see situations where mentoring just doesn't work or that it's not working for an organization or a person? Because I think it is amazing and wonderful to talk about the successes. But sometimes if you've had those mentoring relationships and you're like, yeah, I don't know if this is my thing, or I don't know if this person is my person. What do you do if you find yourself in that sort of situation?
Yeah, it's not always, it's not 100% success rate. And I think the key for an organization to see success is to have ongoing support. If you're going to invest in a formal mentoring program, and I do think organizations need to provide both formal and informal mentoring opportunities. If you're going to invest in those formal mentoring opportunities, it's really important to have ongoing support and communication for folks in that mentoring program, where you can call somebody up and say, you know, thanks for assigning me to Megan. We've tried to make this work. It's not it's not really a match. And I will tell you, it's interesting because at Center for Mentoring Excellence, we get calls like that all the time from mentoring programs that we support. And for 80% of those calls, through some coaching of the mentoring, either the mentoring program administrator or the mentor and the mentee, we've been able to help them transform the mentoring relationship into something that's like successful beyond their dreams. Because a lot of times that's the catalyst for creating structure and accountability that they never had. But sometimes the answer is no, and it's time to move on. And it's really important to equip mentors and mentees with the skills to be able to do that in a way that doesn't feel like a breakup, right? It just feels like, you know what, this isn't a match for us right now. Here's what I've learned from you. I'd love to be able to circle back. Can we redefine our relationship? Having that kind of support to be able to get those relationships on track actually can create more transformative results down the line, and also avoids that, oh, I see you in the break room and I just want to, duck and cover um, as well, right?
Awkward. Consider
Awkward, right?
Consider the reality from the market today and the corporates today. Do you perceive some trend in a specific type of mentoring, like engagement? We need more engagement or succession, or quiet curing. So, what do you see in terms of increase?
Yeah. So you're asking me this question in July of 2025, and I think my answer would be different even 6 months ago.
Wow.
Um, I actually think right now there's a huge opportunity. We're seeing a lot of organizations, uh, I think here in the U.S. and around the world, that are having significant reductions in force. Right? There's a lot of people who are laid off. And what happens a lot of times after a RIF, the reduction in force, is that the people who are survivors are highly disengaged. They're very fearful. Is something else going to happen? Is another shoe going to drop? What's my longevity here? And it's a real risk for employers because they've done this careful analysis, hopefully, of who should stay and who should go. And they're in trouble if the people who are staying now walk out the door, right? So, what an opportunity for employers to create a learning environment for the people who stay and a means of connection for the people who stay. I actually think there is a huge opportunity for peer mentoring in organizations right now, where you're creating cohorts of people who have a safe space to share what their concerns are, to figure out how do you navigate this uncertainty together, where I don't have to go to my manager when I'm afraid that I might be next on the list of a riff and say that I'm afraid, feel like a complainer, all of that. But I can talk to my colleagues and say, all right, how am I going to navigate this in a way that I can add the most value? What can we all do to feel more engaged? How can we support one another? And I think that there's a huge opportunity to create that structure for organizations right now. It's a really special window that I think is really important. And then the other piece is the flip side of that, which is creating the resources for that individual action and accountability. How are we equipping people to create their own developmental networks? How are we teaching people, instead of fearing that if I equip you to create your own developmental network, you're going to be out the door? How about if I think about it from the perspective of, I know you're probably looking elsewhere anyway, because everything is uncertain. How do I help you think through how you want to learn and how you want to develop? So you have a sense that I really care about you as your employer, and that I'm invested in you. And then we can have a development conversation about, oh, you want to learn more about this? Here's a great person to go talk to. Here's a great class you could go to. Here's an industry you could, an industry association you can affiliate with, or whatever it is. I just think that there's both of those things, is creating these peer networks and equipping individuals to create their developmental networks. This is the time for that right now.
Okay. And I think it's so important to understand the context, right? To provide provide the good solutions in terms of if you try to create engage. So this is a good program. So I understand. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people listening are thinking to themselves right now, yeah, right. So an organization is going to invest dollars in that right now when they've just said it's cost cutting measures. But the truth is, it's really, really expensive to bring in new people. And if you're down to the bare bones of who's on the team, if they leave, it's going to be way more expensive to recruit somebody new and then bring somebody new up to speed and all that than it is to create a sense of community and belonging for the people who exist and really invest in their own learning internally. It's much, much less expensive to do it that way.
Hello everyone! If you are studying about safety culture, leadership, risk perception, I would like to recommend my books. They are available in Amazon.com, and each book is an experience to go deep diving in safety culture, and I think will add value in your journey.
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. Because Lisa, what I'm hearing you saying as well really turns traditional thinking on its head. You know, I'm sure many of us have worked in organizations where they have gone through a reduction in force for whatever reason. And you mentioned this, but you're sort of a little bit in survival mode. But actually what you're suggesting is something totally different, which is if you can offer a supportive I was going to use the word structure. I don't know if that's the right word, but a place for people to think about their development and to think about what's next, whether it's there or somewhere else, then that really fits with the whole crux of mentoring as well, which is thinking about your development.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right. And it is a time of culture shift. After a riff is a time of culture shift, isn't it?
Mm.
Because um, you're setting new norms and you're recognizing that people, I mean, I don't know anybody who's at and any of I have many friends who are in organizations that have laid off a lot of people. Some have been part of the layoff and some have been part of the folks who remain. And of those who are part of the folks who remain, they're all trying to figure out what's next for them. That could have been me. And so I want to make sure that my position is safe. So how about taking time to figure out what it is you need in order to feel secure at where you are? And isn't it in my interest as an employer to make sure that you have the space and the resources for that? It is flipping conventional wisdom on its head, right? That you're just there to survive. You better put your nose down and just do the work. But people are more complex than that.
And also, I think earlier you were mentioning how mentoring relationships aren't just for the advantage of the mentee, but also the mentor. So, actually, one of the things that went across my mind when you started talking about this was, gosh, this would be really hard if you're a mentor in that situation. Like, it probably feels great being a mentor when you feel like you can help someone and, contribute to their ongoing success and future. But if there's a situation where there is a riff and you yourself might not know what's next, actually becoming a mentor or continuing to be a mentor in that situation might also help you as well.
Yes, 100% in the case of one-on-one mentoring relationships. And that's why I think that peer mentoring is so important now, because you can have peer mentoring at various levels in the organization, right?
Tell us more about peer mentoring. So that's someone maybe at the same experience level, is it? That you're mentoring one another?
Yep. So peer mentoring can happen one-on-one or it can happen in groups. And I actually think that the time, the, I mean, it's always context specific, but in general, after a riff, having peer mentoring groups, cohorts that are at a lateral level who can meet regularly, set some group norms, talk about how they want to learn together, have a place to share what their concerns are, what the resources, that image and exposure
Okay.
piece that we talked about, and share that with one another and learn together with intention and structure is really, really powerful. So that you don't have a mentor who feels like they have to comfort the mentee when the mentor, him or herself, is feeling ill at ease. If you have a peer group, you're all showing up for one another and you have that sense of commonality where it's like, okay, what are we going to be doing now and how are we all going to rise together?
You're blowing my mind with this, honestly. I didn't think our conversation would turn into this at all, but it's so timely with what is happening in the world. And as you say, especially in the United States, where we're seeing a lot of, things happening right now. And, I
Mhm.
always thought about mentoring a certain way. And what you're sharing here is just so different. So, how can we communicate better about the value of mentoring so that more people want to become involved, either as a mentor or a mentee, or as you say, even with peer mentoring, group mentoring? There seems to be so many different arms of the octopus, if you like, of different ways that one can learn and develop and support one another.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I wish I had the silver bullet, Megan, for that. I'll tell you what my gut is, this the way that this all um, takes root is by each of us talking about what we want to learn and what we are learning from others and promoting one another, right? And so if I am talking in an organizational context, if I'm a leader, I want to be talking about how I'm investing in my own learning and celebrating the people on my team who are investing in other people's learning, right? And if that becomes part of my vernacular, part of my regular communication, part of what's celebrated and communicated, um, it starts to have a ripple effect. If you are a mentoring somebody who is responsible for mentoring in your organization, the power of a testimonial, a video testimonial of somebody who is respected and has invested in their learning and in other people's learning cannot be underestimated. It's there's that movie with Harry Met Sally, that I'll have what she's having, right? It's that I'll have what she's having effect of like, I see somebody really benefiting from from mentoring. And and talking about the benefit of that. And I want some of that. Right. And so I've seen the best leaders not only talk about their own learning, but they require of the people who report to them to share how they're investing in their learning and how they're investing in the learning of somebody else. It doesn't have to be through mentoring. Mentoring is just one vehicle. But if you start to encourage that, promote that, embed that in the DNA of your leadership, and of your leadership style and of your organization, then it really starts to take root. And on a more organic level, each of us as individuals, even outside of our organizational context, can set our own learning goals. We can talk about them with the people over whom we have influence and encourage others to do the same. And remembering that it doesn't have to be a formal mentoring relationship, that informal mentoring can help this stuff take root as well.
Hello everyone! If you are studying about safety culture, leadership, risk perception, I would like to recommend my books. They are available in Amazon.com, and each book is an experience to go deep diving in safety culture, and I think will add value in your journey.
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
Lisa, I have two questions here to explore with you. So the first one is about do you think every leader has a mentor? And the second question is, if you, as your experience, when you're talking about mentor and good mentors, what is the qualities that is necessary to be a good mentor?
Yeah. So to the first question, yeah, I think everybody needs a mentor. CEOs need mentors. Entry-level folks need mentors. And to that point, everybody can be a mentee. Everybody also needs a mentee, right? I mean, there's always somebody you can learn from. And with all of these different modalities, including peer mentoring, that can be really, really powerful. When you stop learning, you stop growing. When you stop growing, you're unable to innovate and change. And if there's one thing all of us know for sure, it's that our world is changing at a rapid, rapid pace. And if we can't keep up with it, it's going to be to the detriment of our own careers and our own satisfaction. So learning is growing, and it's critical to invest in learning, whether it's through a coaching relationship, a mentoring relationship, a peer relationship, whatever it is, at all levels. To your question, Andresa, about what makes a good mentor, I think if I had to say three characteristics, I would say curiosity. I would say, the ability to be curious about yourself and to be curious about other people, as opposed to being prescriptive and judgmental, right? Maybe curiosity is on one side and prescriptiveness and judgmental judgment are on the other side, right? So this idea of just really being curious, I think, is really important. Having humility, that there is always something to learn, that it's okay to really stink at something and to grow at something, and to recognize that you are a learner, and to be a learner first is really important. And then, I would also say the ability to empathize and recognize that, there's lots of different truths, there's lots of different paths. What worked for me may not work for you. And that and that I want seeking to understand your own challenges and views, those three things I think will get people very far in terms of the quality of their mentorship.
Excellent. The three
And
points
Lisa,
are
I'm sure you've had some amazing mentors in your life and career. Would you be willing to share the impact that they've had for you? Because it's probably one thing, to be encouraging and talking about it and offering services, but do you actually feel the goodness yourself with the mentors you've had, and what has been that impact?
Yeah, I love that question. I have been so fortunate to be able to walk the talk of mentoring others and being mentored myself. The organization that I now lead was founded by my mother. And, if you had asked me in my youth whether I would ever have worked with my mother, I would have probably rolled my eyes at you with significant amount of doubt. But she was the quintessential mentor when we began working together, recognizing that um, my own path and what I wanted to do with the business was different than what she had done with the business. Where my strengths were different. And it was the biggest gift ever to be able to carry on her legacy in the business, but also to learn from her and to be mentored by her. So that she's probably was my number one um, mentor. But I think even, and this was an aha for me, just as you were asking me this question, Megan, my very first boss out of college was not the leader that I would have wanted or really even that I needed. And in fact, I might say that she wasn't a terrific leader at all. But what she did do was had amazing hobbies and interests outside of work. And I can remember thinking, gosh, I don't want to be the leader that she is, but I sure want to have some of the interests and the hobbies and the ability as I craft my life and my career to be able to integrate those things. And in some ways, she was a mentor in that way. So even people are complex and whole, and there's different pieces that you can take from different people. And then on a more tactical level, even right now, I am part of a mastermind, a peer mentoring group with three other women entrepreneurs in the learning space. And we meet monthly with some structure and some informality. And we've been doing that for a number of years. And there's not a tricky business decision that I don't run by them. There's not a sticky client situation that they haven't given me advice on and given me more confidence in dealing with. There is not a time where I've had self-doubt that they haven't kicked me in the rear and pushed me forward and said, you can go do this. And it makes a difference every single day to be able to have those kind of relationships that can just propel me forward.
in this
So
direction.
beautiful.
Yeah, yes, very inspiring. Now, you are the CEO of the Center of Mentoring Excellence and president of the International Mentoring Association. So, what is your mission, your personal mission in have this opportunity, like as a CEO, as a president? So, your personal mission.
Yeah, they're different for each organization. So, as president of the International Mentoring Association, this is a 2-year volunteer role. And, I really would like to help lead that organization to become the central go to resource for people in the mentoring world, whether it's mentoring program practitioners, researchers, mentoring platforms, consultants, they're to really be the hub of mentoring resources. It's not something that can be accomplished in the time of my term, but it's something that I really hope to plant the seeds for so that we can help elevate the field of mentoring, both as an academic field, but also as a uh, field that consults with organizations and has tentacles, in in various places. So that's through IMA. Through the Center for Mentoring Excellence, it really is about bringing quality mentoring into every person in, I mean, this is very aspirational, but in that everybody in the workplace understands and can harness the benefit of learning through these mentoring relationships and this connectivity. I've always believed that relationships and are the key to satisfaction in one's own life, whether it's personal relationships, professional relationships. Having this connectivity is what's, to me, that's the antidote to all of this division in the world. And so maybe it's pie in the sky, but to how my mission is really to how do you use mentoring as a way to help bridge that divisiveness by creating meaningful learning connections across individuals and across organizations.
Wow.
We'll solve that problem by next Thursday, right?
But super necessary is necessary.
So I've already said mind blown so many times here during this conversation. And Lisa, I genuinely mean it. You and I met, gosh, it was about 6 or 7 months ago, I think, that we met in person having a hot chocolate
Mhm.
together. And I don't think I really realized the impact of the work that you do, but also the voice that you have to encourage people to mentor, be a mentor or a mentee. But more than anything, how big and broad that was. I, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the conversation because I came into today, and I don't know if anyone else who's listening to this and who's got this far felt this way, thinking that, oh, a mentor, a mentee is this very formal type of arrangement. And yet there are all these other areas that you've shared with us today about the value and the benefit and how to measure success that I'm leaving quite a changed person and, am hoping myself to think through different ways that I can live a life and continue my career to both give and also to learn from others. So I just from the bottom of my heart, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated the conversation. Thank you.
And
Well,
I
I'm
think
so
for
happy that
me is not just about thinking in a systemic way. It's, as you comment, is a holistic. It's
yeah.
bigger than just a traditional concept or I think I'm very inspired today with this conversation. So thank you very much.
Well, that means so much to me. I appreciate your curiosity and your interest in this topic and really the chance to talk to both of you and your listeners and to be a part of this podcast. So thank you so much.